Hello and welcome to the Canyons Are Calling podcast. I'm Cheryl Jocelyn, your host, creator, and producer of the show. Happy spring. I'm so excited that the sun is finally shining in the Zion area and we are having some warm temperatures. I hope that winter is over this year. It has been a long one. But with that, you can expect all of the Zion canyons to be full and flowing for a little while. They should be cold if you can get to them. Be prepared for a lot of water. I would be super surprised if anything was empty because we have had so much rain and snow this year. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of rendezvous and stuff coming up. Like, where are you guys going? What are you doing? What is everybody's plan? I am planning on going to the Arizona rendezvous this week. That's super exciting. I decided to have Tom Seeley on so we could talk a little bit about the canyon conditions and what people can expect for the rendezvous this year. I know they haven't really been flowing for a couple of years now, and so to have them flowing and super high and cold, and it should be a fun time for everybody that's going and going to be able to participate in those canyons. And we also talk a little bit about like safety and how we can, as a team, just come together and try to minimize the accidents that are happening out there. So I really feel like this is a really great interview. We cover a lot of topics. So even if you're not going to the Arizona rendezvous, this has a lot of information. It actually has more information about other things than the canyons for the rendezvous. So definitely worth a listen. We cover a lot, so I hope you enjoy it. Tom Seeley is the owner of Arizona Rock and Canyons, and they do training for canyoneering, climbing, and mountaineering. And he does private courses as well as group courses, so you can look him up there for information on that. And then he also on Meetup runs some trainings from time to time and the Arizona Rendezvous. So if you're interested in the Arizona Rendezvous for next year, you can go ahead and sign up for that. He's already got it listed and information on that. We also talk about the American Canyoneering Association and the Coalition of American Canyoneers. So if you're interested, I have links for both of those in the show notes. And then we talk about the International Canyoneering Database, Accident Database. And a lot of people don't know that, so I'm trying to get the word out about that database. So if you have accidents, you can report them there. And if you're just wanting to know like what's going on out there, it's a good resource to read, what accidents are happening, why they're happening, and kind of get you thinking about how to mitigate those in your own groups. So that resource is out there, and there is a link for that in the show notes as well. So I am going to stop rambling on and I'm going to get to the interview with Tom Seeley. Enjoy. So today we're here with Tom Seeley, and he is one of the owners of Arizona Rock and Canyon. Is that correct? Are you the owner or one of the owners?
Currently the only owner. My partner, Jeremy, who I started the company with, stepped away at sometime last year, I think in the summer of last year. He's just burning it on both ends. So he's got a regular full-time job. Plus he runs on-road canyoneering in Pierce. And he's got a 7-year-old. So I think it was just too much. So he had kind of stepped out just to focus on that stuff. So it's just me these days. And then I got a couple of people that help out when I get overflow.
Awesome. Okay. I was just like looking at your website and going off the information.
Yeah.
So you guys do canyoneering as well as rock climbing and mountaineering. Is that correct?
We do. Yeah. Pretty much those are all kind of in our wheelhouse. So we tend to do the most training in the canyoneering sphere. But as far as guiding goes, we probably actually guide more rock, especially this time of year where we have visitors coming in from all over the place. So I would say kind of the winter, spring, we do a fair amount of rock guiding. And most of that, honestly, is kind of just usually families or stuff at resort that are coming out for a half day just to get on the rocks and have a experience. So it's actually pretty easy.
And where are you located?
So I am physically in Phoenix, but most of the training we do is in Scottsdale. And then when it warms up, we'll head to Payson or Prescott, kind of just depending on the weather. And then when the summer rolls around, even then it's oppressive, even in those places. It's hard to escape. So midsummer, we'll head up to Flag. But typically, we tend just to slow down, which is fine by me. We're kind of pretty dead in the summer, so I tend to travel and kind of recreate, and then kind of gear up for the winter, spring, where it's the busiest.
Nice. What an awesome life to just be able to
It is,
recreate all the time.
yeah, it's pretty good. My mom's still waiting for me to get a real job, but other than that, it's all good. I did real estate for almost 30 years before this, so I'm in a position where I don't have to make X amount of money every week to support myself. So I'm very fortunate in that regard, and could just kind of do something that I enjoy doing, which is if you could do that.
Yeah, that's super awesome. I guided for a couple of years, and it was definitely a dream before I started working for Tom.
Yeah, it has its moments. The actual guiding part is wonderful. It's kind of the back office stuff that insurance and permits and that type of stuff that'll drive you a little crazy. But any field is going to have its issues. But the actual day-to-day kind of work it is quite wonderful. And you tend to get people at their best, right?
Yeah.
So they're here on vacation, they're kind of relaxed, they just want to kind of have a cool experience. So yeah, it's usually really fulfilling.
For me, watching the people change throughout the day was better than the financial paycheck at the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
I was
Yeah,
also a single mom, and I needed to be able to provide a roof over our head, and it didn't always do that, especially in the winter here in Kanab. So
it's very cool to see someone literally petrified and then kind of push through that and get to the other side and like be elated. And
when they're petrified at the 15-foot rappel, but then at the end of the day, the 100-foot rappel is their favorite.
Right.
You did a good job that day, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's good. I've had people crying on the rocks, begging to come down, and all kinds of stuff. But usually with a little encouragement,
Mm-hmm.
I think the human spirit inherently is pretty adventurous. If you can kind of tap into that, I think everyone has a little bit. Some are a little more repressed than others, but hopefully we can kind of get it out of folks and kind of get them to enjoy the day.
Right, for sure. So let's backtrack a little bit and tell us about where you grew up and how you got into the outdoors.
Kind of a different beginning. Probably wouldn't expect me to be an outdoor person the way it started. I grew up in New York on Long Island, and single mom. I was pretty much brought up by my grandmother. And I was kind of a handful when I was younger. They weren't sure what to do with me. So I got shipped off away to school in 5th grade. And that didn't work. So in 9th grade, they shipped me away to Catholic military school. That worked. They definitely reformed me in a lot of ways. So I lived at military school for 4 years. And then once I graduated from that, I went to undergrad in California, where I lived. I went to school in Northern California for 4 years, and then moved to the LA area where I worked in the music industry for a few years. Moved back to New York for grad school at NYU, and then got into real estate kind of accidentally at that time, and kind of started out a little slow. This was probably back in 91-ish, 92-ish. And by 93, 94, going really, really well. I kind of got how to do real estate, and I had a really wonderful career in that. I was an agent for probably 6 or 7 years, got into the management end of things. I ran a big office in New York for many years, and then wound up getting married, and we wanted to get out of New York. It was just so expensive living on the island. So we moved to Virginia, to a small town called Charlottesville, home of Thomas Jefferson and University of Virginia. And more famously, the riots back in several years ago when those people were marching down the streets. I don't even remember all that, but that was kind of crazy to see that on the news. Relatively small town. And then did real estate down there for many years, opened up a firm, and grew that firm quite large, and then wound up selling that, back about 15 years ago with the plans of retiring. That didn't exactly work out. We moved here, wound up getting divorced, and that took a little bit of my money away, so I had to go back to work. But at that point, kind of got back into the outdoors and the love of the outdoors by hiking and climbing and that type of stuff. And probably about 11, 12 years ago or so, I was going to Cedar City and training with Rich Carlson. And that's kind of how I got my intro into canyoneering. And we were doing classes out there, so I ran into my buddy Jeremy out there. And we were like, hey, there's no one teaching canyoneering courses in Arizona at the time that we were aware of. So we're like, hey, maybe we should offer a couple of classes here. So never really had the intention of becoming a professional guide. But that's kind of the track that kind of happened. And then since then, it's kind of just organically grown. Up until right before COVID, it was extremely busy. COVID kind of put the brakes on for most folks. And then a little bit slow the last couple of years, but this year has been wonderful again. So I think we're kind of back on track to where we were, which is really fabulous. So yeah, fast forward, here we are. It's been an interesting ride. There was a little hiatus there where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after real estate. I actually went back to school to become a paramedic. And I did that for a very short time here. Really didn't enjoy it. I didn't realize in the Phoenix area that most of the EMS is handled by fire. So if you're working for a private ambulance company, at least here, you're really doing more like interfacility transportation type stuff. So, and it pays very poorly. So I was making like $16 an hour, and I'm like, wow, I could sell 2 houses a year, make the same money. This is kind of crazy. And so I kind of backed off of that, and then the love of canyoneering started to take off in the training and all that. And then, like most of my life, I get pretty obsessive about stuff and just went deep into it. And then kind of the rest is history. And then probably a couple of years later, Rich approached me. Rich wanted to get out of the ACA, the American Canyoneering Association. So he turned that over to me. I ran that organization for a little less than 2 years. Really didn't enjoy the bureaucracy part of it. And there was other people looking that wanted to run it. So I was happy to release the reins. And Rick Green had taken it over back then. And I kind of just went back into the guiding world. And here we are.
Yeah. So I feel like everybody gets out of the head position because of the bureaucracy and those kind of.
Yeah, it's
I would not
it's
want
really
it.
kind of I don't want to say it's a no-win situation. It's just difficult that we don't have the mass of an organization, kind of like the AMGA does for climbing, where you have a lot of dues paying members, where you could have, a paid board of directors and paid technical advisors and those type of things. So you rely on volunteer work,
Right.
but that's very difficult because everyone has opinions on how things should be. And rightfully so, because it is different region to region. Canyoneering here in the desert Southwest is very different than even the Pacific Northwest, and very different than other places throughout the country,
Right.
and not the world for that matter. So it becomes very, very hard to manage a lot of different personality types. Even though I think everyone has good intention, how we get there is sometimes debated. So I was kind of glad to kind of get out of that realm of things. It's kind of why I left real estate. I just didn't want to be involved with that type of burden in my life.
Right.
So
Groups in
here
general,
we
though,
are.
have great learning and training for the people that take part in it. Like, there's the checklist of things that you need to know, and there's group trainings, and
Oh yeah. I'm super
it's
grateful
such a
that
great
I got introduced to the organization,
right.
and very fortunate that I ran it for a long time and got to see kind of the back end of things.
Yeah.
And Rich was wonderful during that transition, and really gave me a wealth of knowledge to try to kind of push me in the right direction. But here we are, several years out, and things are good. I stopped back then. I am the current president of the CAC, the Coalition of American Canyoneers. So that's a little bit less work and a little bit more specific scope of work, where we're really kind of focused more on access. So it's you don't have a whole lot of input. Everyone's kind of on the same page, working for the same thing. So that is a little bit more structured and a much smaller organization, and it's not as all-consuming as the ACA was, for me at least.
And the CAC, instead of focusing on the training and things, they do amazing things like keeping the Santhrax campground open, doing graffiti removal in California. Like, they've done some incredible stuff for access. So I'm glad that you brought them up.
Yeah, they are a wonderful organization, and if you're listening to this and you're not a member, it's free to join. Just go to the website, and you put in, and you'll get email updates and such. Yeah, and they're awesome. Everyone's a volunteer that works there, and they just kind of really have the best interest of the canyon community at heart. It was a little bit frustrating here the last 2 years with COVID and stuff. A lot of those cleanup projects and stuff were on hold. But those are slowly kind of coming back online. But there's a lot of kind of what I'd call prolific people in that group, so they're kind of deep into the back end of the access, working with the Park Service and the National Forest and and all that stuff. So it's yeah, really a great group of people that are dedicated to really trying to keep stuff open for us.
Thanks for being a part of that. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's also talk about the canyoneering rendezvous that's coming up, the Arizona rendezvous.
Oh yeah, awesome. So Arizona Rendezvous, believe it or not, was started by Rich Carlson back in 2001. So it was 23 years ago. It was
Wow.
one of the first rendezvous ever in the canyon world. The very first one Rich did was in, I believe, in Zion in 1999, and then 2 years later did the Arizona one. Um, and when Rich turned the ACA over to me years back, he turned the rendezvous over to me as well. So I've been running the rendezvous now for about the last, I guess, 6 or 7 years or so. And it's really gone quite well. Kind of started out very small with, 40, 50 people, and we've been consistently, over 100 people now for the past few events. COVID kind of put a damper on things again, like with most. We were kind of closed for a few years there. We had to close in 20 and 21. And then, so last year, we had some problems with the campgrounds, but we wound up doing it in the fall. And then this will kind of be the first April one again. In about 3 years. So fortunately, it's been raining everywhere, so we should have a spectacular canyon season here in April. I've been out quite a bit the last couple of months, and it's pretty fantastic. It's some of the best flow I've seen. Very, very sporty in a lot of spots.
So all the canyons are flowing now this year?
Very much.
That's awesome. I
Very
hear
much
it's just
so.
such an amazing water playground when the canyons there are flowing.
Yeah, it's going to be cold. It's all fresh snow melt.
Yeah.
So, but it should be crystal clear. It should be if we have good ambient temperatures, it should be really pleasant.
Like what types of wetsuits should people be wearing if they're going this year?
You
Will like the
know,
5 mil or the 4.3?
yeah, it's a tough question. Everyone tends to kind of run differently temperature wise. So
That's
I would
true.
say in general terms, a 4.3 is probably going to fit a lot of people. If you run on the cold side, or maybe a 5.4 would be more appropriate. One of the things that I find, at least for me personally, I find if I can keep my head, my hands, and feet warm, I just tend to feel warmer in general. So I think that kind of often gets neglected sometimes or second thought. So if it's going to be cold, I'll wear a neoprene beanie, neoprene gloves, and a couple of pair of wet socks to really keep those parts warm. And then I tend to do well. And then if you do get real cold, you can always throw a rain jacket or something on over to kind of help keep the breeze blowing to you. So
Yeah.
hopefully, mid-April kind of can go either way in Arizona here, but hopefully the daytime temps are kind of at least in the low 80s, maybe mid-80s by then. So it should be pretty pleasant.
That sounds fantastic on our 40-degree day right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 80 yesterday here, so it was quite wonderful.
That's
But we
awesome.
do pay for it in the summer, so
That's true. I've heard a joke that was like, if you can't handle our summers, you don't deserve our winters in Phoenix.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm quite envious of the people that have second homes and just come down, for the winters. But yeah, it's a pretty cool place.
Awesome. So what are some of your favorite canyons in the area?
Um, there's a lot. It's hard at this stage of where I'm at. I've done so many canyons in so many different places. You get a little spoiled. So, my local canyons, while they're dear to me because I kind of cut my teeth on them, by bigger standards, they're not all that great. Some of them are really cool in the sense that they have really neat features and stuff. But for like a long day, a lot of these canyons tend to be a little bit shorter on the end of things. So they're good in their own rights, but compared to some of these really big canyons that are out there, they don't hold up to that. But I would say certainly from the beginner to intermediate or even advanced intermediate level, there are a ton of really good canyons in the area. So during the rendezvous, some of the more popular ones would be like Water Slides and Parker and the Jug. Some folks will do like Shake Tree and Barnhart or even Christopher Creek. So those are kind of like the usual suspects in town. We typically don't go to Sedona that time of the year. It's still a little too cold. There's usually the roads are closed, especially this year because of all the snow. But the Sedona Canyons kind of by the summer, usually by June, July, those are pretty good in their own right. And those tend to be a little bit longer, a little bit more featured canyons. And then, of course, if you head up towards kind of northern Arizona, that opens up a whole lot of stuff where that's probably some of the better canyoneering when you get closer to Page, Waterholes being one of my favorite up there. But there's a ton to do up there too. And then obviously southern Utah is not too far from us as well. So when I say not too far, we can say right within 4 hours reasonable, right?
Great. I
We don't
think
have anything right in Phoenix itself. The closest canyons are maybe an hour and a half.
okay, nice. I think I'm 6 hours from the campground for the rendezvous.
Mhm.
So that's not too
And I'm
bad.
about 6 hours from Zion, so it's fair.
Yeah. Touche. Yeah, I've only done middle water holes. I need to do the end of it and
Oh yeah, the end of it's
Packcraft
wonderful.
down.
That whole canyon, we try to get in there every year. And I've done it in a variety of different conditions. I've been in it bone dry. I've been in it full of water. Um, but it's super easy access, and depending on how you get out, whether you pack raft or get a boat right out, it can be a very easy exit. But the canyon is truly it's truly beautiful. It's got a little bit of everything, and then that big 3-part sequence there towards the end with the culminating with that big 300-foot rappel is really pretty spectacular. So I think it's one of the better bangs for the bucks that are out there.
Yeah.
And just kind of on a side note, that starts on Navajo land, so you do need a permit to do that. You can reach out to Navajo Nation there in Page.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure if this is the way moving forward, but the last 2 times I've ran it, I've been able to get the permit over the phone. It used to be in person only. So I don't know if they've changed that officially, but if you can get it over the phone, it's wonderful because then you don't have to make a trip into Page the day before to get the permit.
Awesome. All right. Any other favorite ones?
I'm kind of a fan. I mean, not so much Arizona, but some of my favorite areas would be kind of out towards Lake Powell and the Peekaboo Mesa area. Have a really wonderful variety of canyons with a lot of different types of features in there. A lot of hard stemming, a lot of hard holdscape. I tend to be kind of drawn these days to the canyons that require kind of group effort to get out of. So those tend for me to be the funnest, where you're kind of having the problem solving, use people's kind of skills sets to kind of assess and get out of certain things. So the more kind of challenging canyons tend to really interest me a little bit more these days than the more straightforward ones. Plus probably guiding straightforward ones all the time, kind of getting out and having to use kind of more specialized stuff. I'm really kind of geek out on rope work. So anytime there's something that requires something special, that usually excites me. But there's just so many canyons in so many different areas that it's kind of hard to pick one. I just got back from Mexico, did a wonderful trip down there in Chapos. That was really spectacular. There was like underground canyoneering in a river cave system, which is these beautiful waterfall drops, really spectacular, all underground. So that was pretty cool too. So there's just so much out there that, I didn't even know exists. And the longer I'm kind of around, it's, watch Facebook and post. I'm like, oh,
I know,
I
right?
was just looking at some stuff in New Zealand that just looked off the hook. I was like, wow, that would be a spectacular trip. I don't know if I can sit on the plane that long, but if we went long enough, I might be able to make that trip. That looked really, really cool. The canyons and that were spectacular.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to pick your brain about those ones in Mexico because we were talking about getting down that way maybe this summer, and canyoneering underground sounds epic.
Yeah. They have caves down there, cenotes.
Yeah.
We only ran that one canyon, but it's beautiful. You can run it from the bottom up, where you can kind of cave your way up, and then drop in and run the river down, and then you could drop in from the way top and run it. That's a pretty long day. It's like a 10-hour plus day, but really, really, really spectacular. And not very, for those who are worried about caves, it's not very tight anywhere. There's a couple of little tight sections, but overall, it's very cavernous. The grand room in there it's unbelievable. It's probably 300 feet high, the ceiling. It's pretty spectacular.
Wow. That sounds dope.
And that is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. So yeah, so kind of the more I'm out, kind of traveling and stuff, you get to see some really, really interesting things.
Yeah, Australia and New Zealand are high on my list just because those
Yeah.
canyons also look incredible.
Yeah, I would just kind of say in general, there's a lot of things we could talk about. I would say probably one of the more disturbing trends right now is the amount of accidents and fatalities that are happening in canyons
Agreed.
that are pretty preventable. And I know this is anecdotal. I don't have the actual data, but just speaking for myself, and obviously I'm pretty plugged into the community and I know a lot of people, but in the last 5 years, I've lost 4 people that I would consider friends and 2 others that I canyoneered with that were acquaintances. And then A few others just kind of peripherally heard about. I mean, that's an insane amount of fatalities in a relatively small sport
Right.
to be happening. Contrast that with climbing, which is so much bigger. I can't think of any of my friends that climb that have died climbing. So not that people don't, obviously they do, but it just seems very disproportionate for the amount of people that are canyoneering to have so many fatalities in so many different ways. Some are just kind of mental lapses, getting on the wrong side of the rope. Other are just bad choices, getting in the canyon during heavy rain.
Ropes that too
Questionable decisions
short.
on,
Yeah.
doing something that you probably shouldn't do, and you're going to try to do it, and it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really kind of puzzling. And the lackadaisical nature of a lot of the comments that I see online, oh, it's just hiking with ropes. It's no big deal. This is pretty straightforward. And the reality is, canyoneering is pretty simple, but it can be very deadly too. So I think,
Right.
ironically, it's not a lot of new people that are having fatalities. It's typically experienced people, or newer people relying on experienced people. So we talk a lot about in training that there's a big difference between being experienced and being competent. So you have people out there that have run a lot of canyons, but maybe are doing things that aren't best practice, and it's working out. So it kind of reinforces that bad behavior. And then they get in a situation where they use that type of rigging or something where it's not appropriate, and it blows up on them, and they don't understand why. So I've seen that happen a few times as well. So it's it's really concerning. So I don't know what the cure is, but hopefully people are kind of looking at this and paying attention and really double and triple checking everything, because I always get a kick out of when you get to a big rappel like a 300-footer at Heaps or Waterholes, and there's 15 pieces of webbing hanging off, because people are so paranoid about. But when they go off a 20-foot drop, they're okay with going off a shrub and not worrying about it. But I lost a buddy last year on a 35-foot drop that just kind of came down wrong and landed on his head. So you can die on a very short rappel, and we often say there's things worse than death. So you could be paraplegic or have some kind of real loss of life issue that you have to live with for the rest of your life, which can be pretty challenging. So we really need to take the sport as seriously as it deserves, and there's no reason why obviously we can't have fun doing this. And I'm not just talking about rigging or repelling stuff. It's just general walking through the canyon. And there's just a lot of hazards.
Ankles.
There's just a lot of things that could happen, and we just really need to be super mindful and in the moment when we're doing it. I have pretty bad anxiety, and canyoneering and climbing. And mountaineering and all that stuff. It's one of the few places where it forces me to be kind of out of my head and present in the moment. And it's very cathartic, because when I'm done, I don't have all that noise and chatter in my head. So it is very cathartic to kind of do that. If people struggle with that, it's a wonderful way to get out of your own way sometimes.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought up the accident issue, because I've had people ask me, like, aside from the International Canyoneering Accident Database, I don't know of any other database that keeps track of accidents, but they were wondering if there was a way or a place that tracks each type of accident, and like how many are because of the rope too short, how many are because of anchor failure, how many are because of, and I'm so technology stupid that would like not be my department.
Right.
But if there were a listener out there who would be interested in that, it would be great information for us to have, because I have two of the most experienced people. I mean, not the most experienced people I know, but I lost two really, really experienced canyoneering friends, and their accidents, like, I want to not be pissed, but they were both preventable, right?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. I mean that's what they're accidents, right? I mean,
Right.
there are freak accidents. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you could just be unfortunate. A rock breaks loose and hits you, and you die.
Right.
Which no one can control. But there are certainly, at least the ones that I've seen, seem preventable.
And
one of the bigger challenges, kind of to your point, is we're not getting firsthand account of it. So there's a lot of speculation and conjecture as to what's happened. And I kind of weigh that, with a grain of
Right.
salt. A lot of times, you'll see the articles, climber dies rappelling or something like that, and they're typically in a canyoneering route.
Yeah.
And so it's unless you were kind of there, and even then, sometimes you can't get a straight answer.
Yeah.
I think it was this, I think it was that. So it's really hard to know sometimes. And it's frustrating from the perspective is we want to know so we can kind of prevent that in the future from happening.
Yeah.
I know the American Alpine Club publishes that journal every year, Accidents in North America, which is really a tremendous resource to be able to go through and read what happens, because these people are just like us. Everybody is capable of making a mistake.
Right.
And the second you think you can't,
that's when it could happen. Most
so, the best advice I could say, if you're in a group that kind of, and I've been in a couple of those where people are very defensive, if you're kind of second guessing their anchor, or offended if you kind of, look at it or pull on it, or, I've seen kind of that go on. And I would just say, if you're that kind of person, I mean, that's fine. I would just kind of highly recommend, if you're newer, and you're asking questions and you're getting dismissed, that's probably not the group that you want to be with. Especially in the beginning. People should be
they should be wanting to teach you, wanting to
right. I think it's you're going to bet your life on this anchor or this rigging. You should probably know what's going on.
Well, and then also, if something happens to me in the canyon, I want to know that my friends have the skills to get me out. So if you're taking newbies with you and they don't know how to set the next anchor and a rock falls on your head and you don't have your helmet on, day's gonna go south real quick.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first things that if you go through any kind of guiding program, whether it's the ACA or the AMGA for climbing, protecting yourself as the guide is pretty critical in the situation, because if you do get hurt, these people don't have the skills certainly to help you, and then they don't probably have the skills to help themselves. So self-preservation in the canyons is really critical as a guide and as a team member. Right. I think we often forget, and if you've ever had someone hurt in a group, you kind of know pretty quickly someone's problem is your problem pretty quickly. So I've had various trips where there have been some significant injuries in the group, and now that's your problem, and you're going to have to figure out how to deal with it to get everyone out safely. So, I think I get why people jump on trips when they're available, and especially when you're new and you kind of, you're just trying to break into the community. But I would try to be pretty select, or at least kind of know someone who knows someone and ask some questions. I'm really kind of blown away at how easy we are putting our life on the line with people that we're kind of acquainted with.
Yeah. And I mean, if you have any questions about who you want to go canyoneering with, a stranger or whatever, listen to Tina's incident, because she went out with a guy she met on Instagram and tried a new sport, and it changed her life completely because he didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
So you need to know that the people that are taking you out, if you are a beginner, actually know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. What's Tom Jones's favorite saying?
Don't be a beginner led by a beginner.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's there's a lot of that. I think, I really, at the end of the day, I think it's ego that drives a lot of this. And that is, probably the worst thing that could be driving, the bus when you're going through a canyon is your ego. You really got to step away from that.
Yeah.
And I see it even when I go out with newer people or people that I haven't canyoneered with, and they know that I'm a guide, and they kind of just, I could see that they don't even want to question what I'm saying. And I try to let everyone know. I say, look, I can make a mistake just as easy as anybody, and the second you lose that humility is really where you're going to run into problems, I believe. So I am certainly, frankly, I'm probably dumber than a lot of people. So I don't, I'm probably a little more attentive and aware. But I'm certainly human, and I can certainly make mistakes. And I appreciate when people are kind of looking out for me and looking at my anchors and looking at this and that and kind of questioning things, because I view that as kind of, the job of the group is really to kind of protect everybody in the group.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of doing it feels like a solo event a lot of times when we're rappelling, but it is a group effort. And like we just talked about a few minutes ago, if a problem occurs, it's our group problem. So
Yeah.
I've been very, very fortunate. The people that I canyoneer with regularly are pretty solid folk. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty lucky in that regard.
I was at a Northwash rendezvous one time, and the guy was setting up on rappel, and he was pretty nervous because it was like a chalkstone rappel where you had to like start at the like level of the rock and then kind of work your way around,
But
and then it
down
was
there,
kind of free hanging, and it was kind of awkward start, and he was pretty nervous, so he was more focused on how he was going to do the rappel than he was like setting up. And when he set up, he didn't have the rope like through the carabiner or something. I can't remember, but I was like, that's weird. Why did you set it up that way? Because I just noticed that it was different than it should be. And he was like, holy cow, like, I'm so glad you noticed that. Like, I totally would have fallen. And it was only 20 feet, but 20 feet, like you said,
yeah,
if you
it's
hit your head the wrong way, it could be detrimental. Or
for
even
sure.
just twisting, breaking your leg, like arm injury.
Yeah,
We still have a long
yeah,
way to go, and we're a long way from a doctor. So
exactly.
everybody has to always be watching everybody else. And the
Yeah,
ego
absolutely.
being like, I know what I'm doing. You don't have to pay attention to me is only what's going to get you hurt.
For sure, for sure. And fortunately, I would say that's kind of the minority. At least of the people that I come across, most people are
Right.
conscientious, but you do get that. Just in general, there's just so many personality types. Once you get over a few hundred people doing anything, you're going to run into different types of folk. Um, so yeah, you kind of got to just find, quote unquote, your people that kind of
Mm-hmm.
feels good and you kind of work with. And really, that's kind of another great part of the sport. You're going to canyoneer with people that you probably wouldn't come across, in typical life, because it really does attract a really kind of interesting group of backgrounds. Everything from kind of blue collar to professional, to athletic to some non-athletic, but people typically are driven by the love of the outdoors and adventure. I think for me, at least, that's kind of the real kind of beauty of the sport itself is really the people. All of my good friends, we all, for 10 years, that's what we do. And those have become kind of the people that I hang out with and frequent the most, other than my life. So, it's rewarding, it's challenging, but at the end of the day, it's dangerous. And we just need to treat it with a healthy respect. And I think that's all you can do, right? We talk a lot about in training, we can't eliminate risk, but we can do everything we can to help mitigate it. So that's really kind of what we're doing. And a lot of the skills that we teach, a lot of the best practices that we teach are really just trying to get people to be set up for success in case something does happen. Because we joke about 99% of all the advanced training that we teach is for like 1% of the problems. So really, if you're setting up really good kind of basic stuff, you should be able to kind of solve a lot of problems. That's not to say stuff doesn't come up that you'll need special rope skills for, but you can do the sport pretty safely and pretty effectively with, I would say, a moderate amount of training, a couple of days, and you can get a whole lot of skill sets that will serve you really, really well. So,
For sure. It's totally worth it because
yep.
then at least you know that you know what you're doing, even if your team doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think the worst thing you could be in a canyon is, that canyon passenger where you're just kind of coming along for the ride and everyone's doing everything. And, you're going to be that person at some point, but hopefully you'll do a couple of trips like that, realize you don't know anything, and either, get some resources to help you online, get some training, get with someone that can kind of sit with you out of the canyon where it's a controlled environment. You can sit down and build anchors and evaluate anchors and do those type of things in a low risk environment. So when you do get out, you're not stressed because it can be very stressful. Just like the first time you get on rope, you're really just kind of so focused on what's in front of you. It's hard to get a bigger picture. And the same thing with rigging, where when you first rig something, you're so focused on the knot, making sure this is right. And you sometimes lose the bigger picture of what's going on. So the more kind of repetitions, the more you can relax, the more things will open up for you. like with everything in life, right? It's just kind of getting comfortable, so you can kind of relax it and take a kind of a bigger picture look at what's going up around you, for you and for your group.
And then I like to practice, like, if I don't use the skills all of the time, I forget them. So if I'm not practicing my knots constantly, I'll get out there and be like, oh, that doesn't look right. That doesn't
Uh,
look right. You
yeah,
know?
I
So,
pretty much comment in every class. I'm like, these are perishable skills,
yeah.
and they will go away if you don't use them. We teach advanced rescue twice a year, and even that first time I'm teaching it, after 6 months, I'm like, like you sometimes forget, a step here or a step there, but a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people. One of the things we try to do with advanced rope work, I try to make the analogy. Some people are like, well, I'm never going to really have to use that skill, and you might not have to. But we try to, when we get into more advanced rigging and rope work, I kind of view it as math. It's teaching you a way to approach a problem and think about it versus the steps of a problem. So if you took advanced math like calculus in college, you're probably not using calculus in your day-to-day job. But it helps you sit down and approach a problem in your life sequentially. And I think that's what rope work does for you. I can look at a problem that I may have never seen, but I have enough kind of rope work skill that I can be like, all right, I know how to figure out that problem. I need to get tension off of this and move it onto this line and off of that line. And I can figure that out based on other scenarios that I'm familiar with. Yeah. So I think it's helpful in that aspect. Even if you're not going to use these skills every day, it'll help you approach problems in a canyon much more effectively and give you kind of a solid foundation to work towards solving a problem.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great analogy. I like that.
I'm sure I stole that from someone. All my best work is great.
That's fine. They probably won't. Well, awesome. I'm really glad you brought that up because like half of the reason that I cover accident stories on this podcast, even though it gives me like a lot of PTSD when I get to 300 foot propelled nows, I'm like, I'm going to fall. But I mean, it is just to get people thinking while they're out there and be like, okay, I don't want this scenario to happen to me. So what can I do to mitigate this problem and not be that guy? So.
Yeah. I mean, there's not one person that's had an accident that woke up that morning thinking there was going to be an accident. It just doesn't happen. It's just another day until.
Right.
And it's a sobering reminder that, hey, and I think it drives the point home when you have friends that and people, I've had at least two that I would consider extremely competent canyoneers and experienced and frankly awesome people that just made a bad choice that day.
Yeah.
And it cost them their life. And that's, it's hard to live with, and I can't even imagine what it's like for the people that, family and people that are even closer. It's,
right.
At times it just seems so senseless that we're, dying in a optional sport, that we're choosing to do. And I get that we love it, but it's certainly not worth a life, at the end of the day. So I don't think, I don't want to harp on it too much because it is rather depressing. But
it needs to be thrown out there because you're right. In the last 5 years, because I've been canyoneering for 11, 12 years now. And in the last 7 to 5 years, it's a lot more deaths.
I don't remember it 10, 11 years ago, but it just seems like, and maybe because there's just more people out there, or maybe I just know more people, but it seems like every year, which is just, it's really unfathomable. Yeah. But from, people that I wouldn't expect it from, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the alarming one. I'm like, that person's not by any means risky or doing anything, that I would consider dangerous. They seem to be a very solid, risk-averse person, and then they're having a problem.
Right.
That makes you pause and go,
Right.
And I know a few people that have left the sport because of that, and it's just like, ain't worth it. And I can respect that. I get it. It's
a few of my friends have definitely slowed
down. It's a difficult choice, for sure.
Yeah, definitely slowed down and done easier, less, I guess, risky canyons.
Yeah, but I think anytime you go for a hike, there's going to be risk, right? So we have to try to balance it all out.
I mean, we still need to do what makes our soul happy, because
indeed,
I know me not being able to get in the canyons, I'm just like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I felt that during COVID. I didn't realize kind of how much I needed it until I didn't have it for a bit. And I think when was that like early 2020, like in March there,
Hmm.
like most folks, we stopped doing stuff for a few weeks, and I was going a little stir crazy, and I didn't really equate it to that. I'm like, wow, I haven't been out in a while, and yeah, it does start to kind of grind on you.
Yeah.
And I remember going out for the first time after a few weeks and being like, oh wow, this is what I definitely needed. That it was kind of like a relief to kind of be back out and kind of chilling with the people that we kind of came near throughout COVID. And that was kind of our risk management thing. Was there's 4 or 5 of us, and we're not going to go out in big groups, but at least this small group can do things, and
Yeah.
that seemed to work fairly well for us back then.
That's what we did too. And like, thank God I live, like, my backyard is just acres of nothing. So we were
Oh, nice.
still able to just like wander and not see people and just, it was
Are
funny.
you in the Kanab area?
Yeah, I live east of Kanab,
East of Kanab. Okay.
between Kanab and Page a little bit.
Okay, so you're right. You're almost right on top of the park then.
Yeah.
Very, very close. That's nice. Do you find yourself going to Zion quite a bit, or is it kind of like, is it just become more of a burden?
There's too many people in Zion, so we go to the Clark.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I remember canyoneering there before the permit system not that long ago, and it seems like every time I go back, I forget how crowded it is. And I think Zion, in particularly, just the way it's structured, but the way the park is, there's really only a couple of roads, so you're really kind of at the mercy of the infrastructure of a very kind of small place for traffic with a lot of people trying to get through there.
Right.
And then I think they do a great job with the buses and stuff, but obviously that gets kind of overpacked at times as well.
Right.
So it can be problematic, but I still enjoy getting out of a hard canyon, reeking of BO and water, and getting on that bus and
I love it
looking
when
at
there's
everything.
no place to sit and you have to stand there with your arms up in front of all the people. And you're just like, I know I smell like death,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
whatever. Enjoy it. I had a great day.
Exactly.
That's
But,
my favorite part of
it is a
Zion.
special place. I mean,
It is
it is
definitely.
unfortunate. I'm sure, like, I kind of equate Zion to canyoneering like I do Yosemite for climbers. And I'm sure climbers at Yosemite kind of get put off by the crowds and stuff. But, people obviously still climb there, and it's still a magnificent place to climb. But Yosemite is so spread out, and there's so many areas. It's not like this mass kind of congestion, in a very small area with very limited resources. I mean, Springdale's a pretty small town to support all those people. The campgrounds are very tiny compared to the amount of people that walk them. So it has its own challenges for sure, but it is, at the end of the day, I get it. It is a pretty spectacular place with a very, very diverse set of canyons. I mean, even canyons that are kind of, adjacent drainages can feel very different. It's a very unique and diverse landscape there. And some of the more pretty canyons that you're going to see in all the canyons I've done. I still come back to Zion every once in a while, and the big canyons there really are as good as the hype. Some of you hear a lot of canyons, they don't kind of live up to it, but well, certainly your first time through Heaps or Imlay, or even Call Up, it's a spectacular run. You get to see stuff on a scale that you don't normally see, and they're really kind of hard physical days, which really require good team and teamwork, and yeah. So some of the more
Definitely need
fun
to be
canyons.
selective with your people when you go through those canyons.
Yeah,
And
for
then
sure.
going through them like full versus empty too is really cool.
For sure.
Like, I've only done Imlay, but I've done it full and I've done it empty, and it's a challenge both ways.
Yeah, one of my favorite posts I see on Facebook is like, "Hey, I'm running Heaps this weekend. Anyone want to join me?"
Right.
I'm like, that's probably not a good idea. You might want to be a little more selective. Your first time through.
Yeah, I just don't know that I would go through Heaps with a group of people I've never done a canyon with.
No, but there are, and then people do run into problems, unfortunately. But,
Right.
So you will see that out there every once in a while.
Choose wisely, kids.
Choose wisely. My son always says, Dad, if you play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes.
Exactly.
So you got to be careful.
Yeah. And we've had so much snow in Zion this year that people need to be prepared for a lot of cold water in probably every drainage. I would be surprised if anything is empty, because We've been hammered. We continue to get hammered. We got hammered yesterday. We're gonna get hammered again on Monday. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
not okay.
we got some snow up north yesterday in Arizona, which is pretty late in the season for that. But yeah, it's been a wonderfully wet year, and it couldn't come. I spent even California too. I mean, we've been so
Yeah.
dry. Uh, Lake Powell is, very, very low.
Hmm.
It'll be curious to see how much of a difference it makes here, by the summer once all the melt has happened,
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
especially in Colorado. But so far, the flows have been really fantastic, and it's just going to continue to get better here. Stuff starts to melt at the higher elevations here. Stuff's warming up locally, and in a few weeks when the round is here, it should really be prime weather, prime flow. So I'm really looking forward to the season. We've been kind of hitting it early. You pay a heavy price in Arizona early. It's very, very cold. We've been running canyons the last, month and a half now. And they're challenging. You're typically post-holing through snow to get up into them, and then you're kind of, busting through ice and stuff. And the water's extremely cold, but the flow is wonderful and it's crystal clear. And I don't know what it is about snow in the canyons, but it's really pretty magical. It's miserable, but magical.
right.
So we won't have that here in April, but we will have the flow. So it's a nice compromise with the warmer ambient temps. But you still get that nice flow, so it should be pretty good.
Are you guys wearing dry suits with the snow, or are you just going fast and staying warm?
So some people will wear dry suits. My wife being one of them, she runs really, really cold. So a lot of times I'll be in even like a 3-2, and she's in a dry suit. So it's kind of a personal preference. I hate dry suits personally. I think I was choked to death in a previous life because anything around my neck is maddening to me. I can't, even a tie. I wore a tie for most of my life, and I just always had to have it loose. I just hated that feeling. So that tight gasket around my neck is pretty miserable. I find if the water these days, if I require more than a 5 mil with like a vest, I'm just not going to probably run the canyon. I'm getting, I'm in my mid-50s now, and
right.
It's just getting the fun factor is diminishing. Even 10 years ago, I was much more tolerant of that. But enough crap hurts on me already. I don't need to add to the pain and suffering of my daily life. But every once in a while, I get sucked in. I have a lot of younger friends that kind of shame me and then make me go. And so sometimes I gotta heed my own advice and check my ego.
Right. Yeah, the time I wore a wetsuit in Imlay, I loved it. I was so comfortable, and my friends were like, "Let's hurry, it's cold." But I worry that I'll like snag it on a branch or like scrape it on sandstone or something, and it'll get a failure. So wetsuits
gotta
are
be super
easier
careful
to deal with. So, and then I find that like wearing the raincoat helps a lot.
For sure. Yeah, especially with the wetsuits, right? Yeah, I mean, the way the wetsuit works, it's capturing a little thin layer of water between your skin and the neoprene.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in the water, that's absolutely fine. But when you're out, it's almost like a swamp cooler effect. If you have cold air blowing through the neoprene, it's actually cooling that water next to your skin, which will create a chill. So if you're feeling that, if you put a cheap wind shell on just to keep the wind from whipping through the neoprene, you can get significantly warmer just by doing that. I've been in several canyons, just really kind of chilly when it's windy, and you put on a rain jacket. It can really kind of help take the edge off it for sure.
Yeah, when I found that tip, I was like in heaven. I always carry it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well,
awesome.
We're getting almost out of time.
Okay.
But I have a couple questions that I ask everybody at the end of the interview.
Oh, awesome.
What is your favorite in-canyon snack?
Probably bacon. Ooh. I buy pre-cooked bacon, and it'll last pretty indefinitely in the seal. So I'll throw that in my dry keg, and then bacon is pretty dope in the canyon.
That sounds incredible. I've never had bacon in the canyon, but
no,
like salty enough, and then like a little extra greasy energy.
Yeah, one of the best canyon snacks that I ever started taking out. A shout out, I think, to a mutual friend who had passed in a canyon, someone who I really love is Cassie, and we were doing peeps, and we stopped at the crossroads, and she busted out pizza, and I was like, oh, pizza and pizza. That's just decadent. So that would be my favorite scene snack. She did not share. I think I got a piece of crust,
Oh.
but
Nice.
I,
I
I
brought burritos once because in the summertime they would like get warm enough by the time, from morning till evening. And it was vegetarian, so it was just like a bean burrito. And they would be warm. But one time it like wasn't hot that day.
mhm,
And so the burrito was a little frozen still. And I don't think that I bought a burrito since then. But
nice.
yeah, like actual food is kind of nice in Canyon. And I miss
That's also
Cassie. Thanks for bringing her up.
yeah. She's I mean that's a classic example.
Yeah,
Someone that you would never expect uh,
100%.
an accident out of. Someone very conscientious and a fabulous just human being.
Hmm.
And stuff like that. It's just so painful. I mean, not that any age is good to go at, but to be that young and that full of life, it's just heartbreaking.
So
You
many
know, it's
lifetimes lived by her, like so many adventures. It's,
yeah, yeah, for sure. And just a good spirit. I miss her a lot.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
So moving on to After Canyon beverages. I know hers would be a beer.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not a big drinker, so I typically don't drink after a canyon. Not that I'm opposed to it morally. I feel like everyone has their quota that they're going to drink in their lifetime, and I've well exceeded mine in college.
That
So
happens.
I just don't uh, have the desire to drink as much as I used to. I'll have a beer occasionally here or there, but that's about it. So not a big post canyon celebrations
Well,
on
there's
my end.
still like some people like Mountain Dew, some people like Diet Coke or like water, coffee.
Yeah, I'm more of a probably a water guy at the end of the day.
I mean, you have to stay
They're very boring.
hydrated with or without
Part,
lemon.
I'll partake in other recreational drugs at the end of the day.
Nice. Are they drugs or are they medicine?
Depends what state you live in.
That's true. I have my card. I'm a
Yeah, me
patient.
too.
All right. What is your favorite piece of gear that you always carry with you?
Hard to say. I mean, the piece of gear that I'm wearing the most, I typically wear the same harness in every canyon. I've been using that Singing Rock XP harness for several years now. I'm a fan of that. I typically am using rod clay packs. I'm fans of those. I don't know if I have a favorite piece of gear. I think if one of the more versatile pieces of gear that I don't use a whole lot, but serves a lot of purposes if you did, is a pencil micro traction. Those things can come in super handy for a variety of different things. Um, I use a Purcell Prusik as a personal anchor that they've obviously using that quite a bit. I know a lot of folks use cowtails and such. I kind of like the Purcell. It seems to be the most compact design. That is kind of a general rule. I try not to carry much on my harness moving through the canyon. Just kind of learned over the years. It just kind of just messes up your gear and sometimes it gets snagged and caught on stuff. So usually I'm just carrying a couple pieces of gear in my harness these days and everything else found that's in my pack. I got a favorite piece of gear that's kind of obscure. Shark skin neoprene socks are dope.
Oh my God, my
They
husband
have
and I
they
were
have like a
talking
little
about shark skin the other day, like 2 days
oh
ago.
yeah
That's crazy. They
they're
have
cool. They got
neoprene
like a little
socks.
fleece lining in them.
Okay.
Uh, and so they're super comfortable and super warm. They're not cheap, but I might go with those.
We're
That's
gonna
a
have
pretty
to
cool
look
piece.
into those for the rendezvous. Well,
Yeah,
he'll have to get some. I'll wait till next time.
yeah.
So how has canyoneering changed your life?
uh, I mean, it kind of is my life. In very, it's how I make my living. It's how I have fun. It's most of my friends. My wife also canyoneers,
That's
albeit not as
awesome.
much since we got married. I don't know how that works. She tricked me. Uh, she will still come, but it's hard because obviously we're not progressing at the same rate. So now what I consider fun is, nightmarish to her. So I'm on smaller trips. She'll be at the rendezvous this year, so some of those trips she'll probably be okay on, but the bigger trips not so much. But yeah, it is my life. So yeah, I owe a lot to it. It's help kind of help me as a person to grow and to kind of force myself to be in uncomfortable positions. I'm kind of a big fan of needing to suffer for balance in life. I feel like it's hard to experience joys in life without kind of the opposite. So that yin and yang of kind of life. I really, the longer I'm on the planet, I probably didn't believe that 10 years ago, but I certainly believe with suffering comes joy. And I rather suffer kind of more in a controlled environment in the canyon than kind of life suffering, due to heartbreak and other things. So putting myself in situations where I'm uncomfortable, ironically, will kind of bring me joy later on. And I kind of recognize that it's important to kind of, I don't want to say be miserable, but to have some uncomfortableness and pain and a little misery in your life can help balance your life. I've never been cut off coming home from a canyon where I yell at someone, like I do during the week,
Like during traffic.
And I think that's because, all the anger and aggression and testosterone and BS is left on the heinous exit. And when someone cuts in front of you, you're like, where, out of a canyon for a couple of weeks, someone cuts me off, I'm like, you want to kill him.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the best part of it for me. It's an enjoyable way to suffer, and it helps bring balance to my life. And the people are typically fairly incredible that you meet. There's some really interesting characters that are out there from all walks of life. And certainly I'm friends with people that I would probably never have the opportunity to be friends with without it.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. Some of the best I know are through canyoneering. So
yeah,
super great
for sure. And in tough times you get to see people's character, which is interesting. Some people that you least expect things from are sometimes often very surprising, pleasantly surprising.
Okay, last question. Any safety advice you would like to leave our listeners with before we say goodbye?
What type of advice was that?
Safety.
Oh, safety advice. Yeah, I think we mentioned it earlier. I think having a present mind is really the salvation of being in a canyon. If you can live in the moment for a variety of reasons, but safety probably first and foremost, will save you probably from a lot of anguish. So be a good teammate, constantly watch out for your friends, constantly take a look at people, as you're getting on the road, evaluate kind of everything. And just be mindful of kind of your body and where you're at all times. It's super, super easy to kind of lose focus just for a minute and make a turn and hit somebody or do something that you aren't anticipating doing or planning on doing, and it can have bad consequence. So sometimes it sounds kind of a little trite, like, oh, be present. It's not, it's a simple thing, but it's not easy to do. So at least for me, I constantly have to remind myself, hey,
be here now.
Be here now for yourself and for others.
Yeah, I like that. Very well said.
Cool.
Okay. Well, how can people reach out to you and get a part of the rendezvous or
so unfortunately the rendezvous has been sold out for months. We typically run it the second week in April rather. So the 2024 one's already posted on Meetup. If you want to look at it there, you can start signing up already. And you can find me online at azrockandcanyon.com if you have any questions, or you can email me. It's just az and my last name Seeley at gmail.com. And I'm super happy to help anybody in any way I can. I'm very, very, very grateful for the canyon community in general, and I'm a big fan of giving back. So I get probably more out of giving back than people do from receiving, and it's kind of a weird thing that I never anticipated. But yeah, it's really cool. It's really gratifying to be able to help people pass through some tough times and get them out there and doing things that they may not have done previously.
Oh, awesome. Good for you. Good for getting out there.
Yeah.
All right. Can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it should be good.
The canyons are coming.
Awesome.
Let's go.
They are calling, and we must go.
We got
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm humbled and honored to be here, so thank you so much.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Tom Seeley. Hope to see some of you at the Arizona Rendezvous this next week. Starting on, I'll be in there on the Thursday. I don't know. I think that's the 14th. But anyway, hope to see some of you there. Come say hi. And yeah, hope to have a good time. Be prepared for cold flowing water. And I will have links for Tom for the Arizona Rock and Canyon page, for the Coalition of Canyoneering Accidents, for the Coalition of American Canyoneers, for the American Canyoneering Association, so that you can get all that information. Also for the meetup group, so you can sign up for next year if you're interested. Yeah. So if you enjoy this show, please share it with a friend and maybe rate it or review it on Apple or Spotify. That really just helps people find out that the show exists and helps other people know that it's a good listen. So yeah, do that. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, that's how I'm able to go to things like the Arizona Rendezvous, support things like the Uray Rendezvous, buy awesome sound equipment, etc. So Patreon is patreon.com/the canyons are calling. And there you can choose from $2 to $20, I think, to donate for the show. And with that, you get stickers or beer glasses, depending on what level. And then also the monthly canyon chats, where we just get together and talk about canyons. And it's just a fun way to know the canyoneering community and, give back to the people that support the show. From time to time, I get guests on there. We talk about different things. So it's really fun. And it's the first Wednesday of every month. So if you'd like to join us on that, support me on Patreon, get on those calls. That'd be awesome. I also have the website, The Canyons Are Calling, where you can get beer glasses and stickers and Doug Tug toys and little ropes to practice with and all those kind of things. And that's just another way that you can support the show. So I really appreciate all of your time and listening and sharing and reviews and all of those things. And yeah, the canyons are calling. I'm going to stop talking. Get out there. Let's go.